Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in Academia. I am your host, Don Irvine, joined by my co-host, Brian McNichol.
Good morning. Hello, deplorables, dregs, despicables, chumps, Neanderthals, semi-fascists, those who need Hillary's reprogramming program, and of course the dog-faced bony soldiers.
All right. Yes. So it's a mouthful. I do want to start off by saying happy birthday.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean my daughter too.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because I guess Lori said to MK too. So
yeah, she's 19.
Yeah, you were kind of an old guy there.
Yeah, yeah. So it's pretty cool. Yeah,
That's nice. It's kind of nice when that happens. Who gets more presents?
yeah. That's what she does. I mean,
Well, that's good. Yeah. So you're saying it's like just in that little as before we started there. So I've got this poster of Spencer. This is a redo. Actually, the one from the funeral that we used. Um, my they had put one together, but when I tested it before, they had some bubbles in it. So then when the studio lights shine, it makes it look, it has this weird look to it. But now we've got that one spot in there.
It's lightsabering us.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah,
Here's some knowledge.
Who knows? Maybe I'll think. I don't know if I can. Well, the lights are kind of the way they are. It is what it is. Weather report pretty good this week. Actually, I was looking ahead. This is going to be a nice week.
Yeah, I think I don't remember all the birthdays, but I think about all but 10 have had good weather. I've had, wherever I've been, it's been just terrific weather, and today is another one of those.
You get to go out and play some golf, maybe.
I'm hoping to sneak out a little early.
That's always good. Yeah, yeah. Don't tell anybody. This does to us doing all this. All right. So news-wise, I mean, the Russia-Ukraine situation continues to kind of plod along. Not as much attention focused on that because of Israel. But it still is out there, still major concern. I mean, we're at day roughly 610. We're getting, I mean, we're 4 months away in essence, I guess, from the 2-year mark. So it's pretty remarkable.
It is, and so the progress is slow. Sort of digging in for the winter at this point. They're way north of us. People don't think about this, but like they're across the ocean from the middle of Canada. So it's already pretty close to the actual full-on winter there. So, I don't see a lot changing there for a while. I think that as you say, the attention is elsewhere. It sort of gives Putin an opportunity to play. When you think about it, though, like the cruelty, the just disregard for human life that the Russians showed going into Ukraine turned in, it's sort of a model for what has happened since. So the world is sort of said in the last, as you say, almost 2 years that, we won't really we say we will stand up to that and stop that and do stuff about it, but we won't really, right? We won't really get in their way of doing that. So, you got to think about that. There's consequences to that. If you tell the barbarians of the world that they can succeed, you're going to get some barbaric behavior.
Yeah, I mean, the longer this thing goes on, is it at this point? I mean, does Putin gain a little bit more of an edge? Because I mean, we've talked about this time and time again in terms of how much money and material training we've given and other NATO countries have given to Ukraine, but they're still fighting, and they're still slogging along. I mean, I've always thought that this whole thing becomes a quagmire and it begins to look like Russia and Afghanistan. And that wasn't, Soviet Union and Afghanistan, and that wasn't very good for them overall. They spent a lot of time there and really, had to run, put their, heads between their tails and run for that. But, Putin's dug into this and we haven't actually done there's been no big strike on the Ukraine side, nothing that has really pushed to the tipping point where Ukraine gets the real advantage to finally close this out. They've had victories, but it's just been back and forth. And
well, I mean, so we were talking about this. I think we talked last week a little bit about this. the lines haven't moved for almost a year, right? So Russia has what they want out of this. They have a path from across the bottom of Ukraine to the Black Sea, which has always been Russia's historic thing, is to get a full year-round deep water port, right? Which they now can get all the way to Crimea and do it there. And so I don't, I think they would like, there's the Rus and all this stuff. And so, would they, if Kiev was donated to them, would they take it? Yes, they would. But, I think he's got what he really was trying to get out of this, and that he's not necessarily in the frame of mind to push for a lot more. So that kind of changes the math, right? He's just going to hold what he has. So, so we have to think about, okay, do we want to have do we want to fight them for, to get them to move off spots that they're pretty well dug into, and the question for us in the United States is, this would take a lot of resources and probably some boots on the ground to actually succeed at it. Is that what we want to do? Right. So, it's getting to be a tougher question, because, to make any difference now would require an investment that the public opinion in the United States does not support. What happens when we try to fight wars that our public opinion doesn't support. And, you get it's complicated now. It's to a point where, they may need to start thinking about, like, what's the way out of this, because, the support that it would take to change the math as it is on the ground now is probably not there.
Right. And I think that's why, Biden had that, that speech or talk from the Oval Office, whatever you want to call it. And, part of that was to propose, a lot of aid, most of it going to Ukraine. And we've talked about the Republicans in the House who have been howling at this for a long time. There are quite a few of them have been diametrically opposed to aid and, for Ukraine. But now, even there's people in the Senate, Republicans in the Senate, that are not so crazy about this idea, because I think that the fact that we've been here for nearly 2 years and we're kind of at a standstill, both sides are there. And as you said, really, unless, we go in there, with boots on the ground, unless other NATO countries decide to commit troops, it's going to be very hard, I think, for this war to, for Ukraine to really gain much of an upper hand at this point. I think this is
That's right.
They're kind of dug into their positions, and nothing much is going to change. We hit winter. We know that's a tough time. That not much, that's the way things are there. The brutal winters, chances are you can't, you're not really going to get much of an advantage there. Things can be tough. So this is, things are starting to change. And as you said, public opinion, I don't know that public opinion, wants boots on the ground. I think there's still a lot of people that support Ukraine, which is great. But I think the support is beginning to wane a little bit, and questions are beginning to ask. I
think one thing we're missing opportunity on this too is, there's some Democrats who are against any more aid to Ukraine as well. Bernie Sanders in the Senate, Brad Sherman and a few others in the House, peaceniks, so to speak, and various other little reasons they have. But we have a chance to put some division on them, right? And to make them speak with one voice on something that they don't really have one voice gathered on. So, that's another thing that Republicans need to look at here, is that, the Democrats are not 100% for this either. So I think it's worth looking, having the conversation about what do we want to do, and, keep the Ukraine in the loop of that conversation, but they don't get to dictate it, right? And so we got to look at what is our interest.
Can we go in? With limited ground forces, we commit a smaller number, and then see if we can get NATO to kind of come along. I know NATO has supporting a non-NATO country. This is very tricky. There's so many ramifications, and the politics of everything that gets into this and muddies the waters and all those kind of stuff. But I hate to see lives lost, in this battle. I mean, Putin doesn't really care about the civilians in Ukraine.
Right.
He wants the country, he wants the territory, and then he'll do whatever he can. He'll be kind of like China. They want to steamroll over things. They want to just take over and assimilate and all that kind of stuff. So, I would dig in, but I do begin to question in terms of how much money can we throw at this,
Right.
where we've been here for, like I said, almost 2 years, and we really haven't made much progress. So now I think you have to start looking at this and you need a new strategy or some other thing there. And just because Zelensky says, we need more money doesn't mean that we should give them more money at this point.
They don't, they can't get, I mean, what are we talking about that would make a difference, right? You say a small force, right? Get NATO to do a small force. Okay. Does that break this logjam? I don't know. Okay. So then once you're in there and you're saying, okay, because then you start saying, okay, yeah, 20,000 is not enough, but 40,000 would be. Okay. So then you say, okay, we got 40,000. It's not really, it go to 60, and so, and I'm just throwing out numbers of stuff. I'm not, I have no idea what the commitment would really be. But, these things have a way of snowballing, right? And I think, that is what happened in Vietnam. That's what happened in Korea, a lot of these things, right? So if we don't want to make a big time commitment to the other side of the world on this, then a smattering commitment, which is what we're doing now, I don't know. I mean, so far so good, but maybe not.
Yeah, I mean,
it's complicated.
Yeah, I mean, I want to believe that, a commitment by NATO to put some kind of troops in there would send a message to Putin. Also, could potentially pin Russia on its heels and make Putin maybe change his mind. But there's no guarantees of that. Things can go wrong, And so then that, as you say, then thing is to say that all the countries go in and they commit, anywhere from 50,000 to 100,000 troops, and we still are no better off, than we are today. Then becomes just like, do you start withdrawing them? There's just so many. There's just so many.
Right. And how long are you going to stay there and preserve the peace?
Right.
And what if it's the other way around? What if you succeed? Right. What if they start pushing Russia right on out the door? What do these Russia's suddenly top allies in Iran, China, elsewhere do? Right. North Korea. They brought the dear leader to Moscow recently to talk about weapons sales. So, something's going on out there,
Yeah. So, I mean, all those things have to factor in. This is no easy decisions in this battle at all. But I thought, we haven't really talked too deeply about this over the recent weeks. We've been focused last couple of weeks on Israel as this continues to move on. Israel is, putting out airstrikes in Gaza. People are complaining about, there's a lot of whining about the number of, civilian deaths and whatnot. But this is what is going to happen when you harbor Hamas and you let them do what they've done, and
turn over power, pay them, collect money around the world for them, support them, keep them in power for 2 decades or whatever. And like, wow, they did some stuff. They considered themselves entitled and went off the reservation. What do we do now?
Yeah, I mean, and so there's calls for a ceasefire, which Israel says no, and so this is once again make Israel look like the bad guy, because ceasefire is supposed to be like, this is the reasonable standard. Everybody, you should be for a ceasefire. Why do you want war? But once again, they were attacked. Innocent people were killed in some brutal attacks. I'm sorry. I mean, I just don't have a lot of sympathy for Hamas, any of their supporters at all.
Yeah.
And so, it's to try to squeeze and Israel for a ceasefire. I don't see it. I don't think that's reasonable.
Rubble don't make trouble. Let's get this down to where it bounces. Right. The parts of Gaza that are used for terrorism, make them bounce. Right. Bomb them until they bounce. Right. You got to make sure this doesn't happen again. You got to serve notice to the rest of the world that if you do this, you're going to pay a heavy price. That's one of the things that hasn't happened. Is it looks like, 5 minutes after this happened, there were people, Biden called, Bibi and said, don't retaliate. Like, excuse me, we got to retaliate, right? So, I think that Israel's going to do what it's going to do. Unfortunately, they have some hostages that probably won't go well for them, but you got to make sure this doesn't happen again, and the people who are responsible understand the stakes.
Yeah, I mean, you just mentioned hostages. I mean, we've seen the numbers. We've seen the rough estimates for how many people have been captured and hostages. And Hamas has released a few of them. But what struck me the other day, because I had not actually looked at the list or anything like that, was just that they released these people, and they were what? One woman were they both in their 80s, or just one woman was in her 80s? I'm thinking, like, are you kidding me? I mean, you're taking hostage these elderly people. I'm sorry, yeah. and they describe the terrible situation. I mean, this is another thing too. It's just that the treatment, if what they're saying, is true. It's like we want to get those people out there. I don't, so I kind of wonder in just the back of my mind whether or not Hamas and releasing them, there isn't a little bit of a game they're playing. It's like, okay, we release these older people, and then we know they're going to tell them, about the, we make sure they tell them about the terrible conditions to try to force Israel's hand a little bit more. Like, you need to negotiate, because we've still got, you've got like 200 people here, and they're going to, we're not going to treat them nicely, as evidenced by these people we released, or something. I don't know. I'm just thinking that there's something going on here with Hamas for releasing it, because to me, Hamas is not releasing these people out of the goodness of their hearts.
Right. And there's some money changing hands too. We say, oh, we don't pay ransom. Yeah, we do. We pay ransom all the time. So yeah, that's right. And the other thing is like the Hamas, they don't really have a lot. It would be a muted one. That's right. He's right. You got to pound it. You got to make sure this doesn't happen. And I don't know that hostages, I think that they could, to the extent they can do this, commando style, right? Where you do it surgically, you go in and exactly where the people are, and you can go and get them out yourself. That's a worthwhile way of doing it. To the extent, Israel can treat this as a law enforcement function, good for them, right? As opposed to an army attacking its, part of its own country. I think that's good, right? And that way you're punishing the exact people responsible, and that's not just a blanket community group punishment, So, but at some point, like, you have to debilitate the infrastructure. So this cannot happen again, right? There's two things going on here. There's avenging what happened, and there's making sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah. I mean, so Nancy Pelosi, I mean, she made a statement that Israel deserves justice, but not revenge.
Yeah. Whatever. Yeah. It's the kind of, like, you think about like this level of slime from that person, that particular person you mentioned there. That's a perfectly slimy statement. Sounds like I'm all for you. But
yeah, I mean, it's just kind of ridiculous in terms of how that's been there. You seem to have frozen up on my screen. So anyway, I don't know, Pelosi and what the comments that she makes. It's like, is she trying to play, two sides of this? I'm like, I'm pro-Israel, but I'm not going to anger, the Arab world or something like that. And all of these things kind of makes me wonder about what the heck is going on there. Brian, I'm waiting for you to unfreeze. Brian. Yeah, we haven't had this in a long time. Can you still? Oh no! Can you still hear me? All right. Oh, there we go. So we're going to wait for a second here. Hopefully Brian will come right back in here. Appreciate you joining us. We had, like, we're glad that we're on Facebook today, because we tried to actually do this a normal way, and something with StreamYard and Facebook was not working at all. But anyway, so I will go on. Yep, here it comes. I was about to.
Ta-da.
All right. Yeah, you haven't missed anything. I figured you'd be back in a sec. We haven't had that happen in a long time.
That's right. It used to be my fault. I don't think it was my fault that time.
I don't know. I don't know
I
what
was just
happened.
happy it wasn't my fault.
Yeah, I don't know what happens. Technology sometimes it just makes me wonder. I did want to go on to this thing where I saw this report that there were estimated to be like 100,000 people who had rallied in a pro-Palestine rally in London. I mean, what does this say about, I don't know, the world or just how things are going? That, where you'd think in general that Israel would gain some support have massive support because of the way that Hamas's brutal attacks, but it's showing that there's a very strong pro-Palestine sentiment out there. I
In the
mean,
United States too. I guess there
yeah,
was, we got my son's school. They sent a note home yesterday saying, there was remarks painted on the bathroom wall, and we washed it all off, and we're looking for the people responsible and all this kind of stuff. So it's here too. There's rallies. DC had a huge rally the other day. I mean, these people they're supporting thuggery because they think it's, you're getting whitey, you're getting at the Jews or whatever. And so they don't really, they look at it as you're throwing off oppressors. So there's no moral component to it, right? I'm getting free. I'm taking off the shackles, right? And so there's nothing I do in the name of taking off the shackles can be questioned morally. And of course, that's patently absurd, but that's what they're saying.
Yeah, and look, I'm not trying to quell anybody's, right to free speech. You can do that. I mean, that's something that
protest all you want, yeah.
Right,
But I mean, the idea that like there's that many people in Western Europe, and it's all over Western Europe is a fire over this, right? And the United States, who are throwing the Jews under the bus, it's a sobering thing, right? It's a lot has changed, but a lot has stayed the same, right? The racism, especially of the left, in Europe and in the United States, knows no bounds. It's never been quenched, and it never will be.
Yeah, and I know, a lot of times with these demonstrations, of any kind, is that there are other people who get swept up into it. They think this is going to be a popular cause. They just want to be a part of something. They have no idea really what they're demonstrating for or whatever, but they get to be part of it. The thing with this that really gets me is just that, when the people that I've seen that have been, defending, Hamas and all of this have just, they don't seem to have, they just seem to ignore the brutality that has occurred.
Yeah.
And it's mind boggling. I mean, Rashida Tlaib, a member of Congress, it's like, look, I understand, you have a very long track record, when we understand where you come from and your heritage and everything like this, but come on, let's like, that doesn't say that you have to actually spout this line all the time. You have a brain supposedly where you can see that this was an unprovoked, uncalled for, definitely, inhumane act on the part of Hamas. And how do you defend that? I mean, it's just, I just cannot, I can't fathom this.
Yeah, that's right. So that's what I'm saying. You get on the left, you get into academia, and they're not presenting this story straight, right? They're not telling it straight at all. They're like, these are oppressed people. They're under the boot of colonialism and all this stuff. And it's like, okay, I think the widest part of Israel is 12 miles wide. I mean, this is a tiny sliver of the desert, right? That's what they have. Okay, but you can't. In 1948, the UN said, okay, these people aren't really safe anywhere. So here's a spot in the desert where you can go and be safe, right? Of course, they were attacked the next day, and they've been attacked ever since, right? And this is just the latest of that. But that's where you told them to go, right? You said, go to Israel. Israel's for the Jews, right? And so they said, okay, wherever we are in the world, we'll just pack up our stuff and we'll go move out into this desert for you. Right. But you move out in the desert, then you got to leave them alone. Okay. And fortunately for them, they've been smart enough and tough enough and resolved enough to build a defense / crime fighting capability to keep these people mostly at bay. But this is one where, this is the middle of Israel, a music festival. These people didn't do anything. They're not your problem. right? They're chosen. In fact, the victims of this were chosen because they found files and Q drives and whatnot on this. They were chosen to shock the Israelis, to create anger, right? You went for kids, decapitated kids, raped old ladies. You're doing this. You're choosing victims because of their vulnerability, because of their inability to fight back, because those victims enrage the other side the most, right? You're not going after soldiers. You're going after this, right? That's right. That's right. That's right. It's a real thing. And so Charlton was saying last night that the temple that he attends there in Shreveport has gotten bomb threats. So I mean, that's just a normal town in the middle of America that it's there too.
Yeah, I mean, Hamas. I mean, it's a soft target by doing that, but it also, you can inflict kind of maximum damage and get the maximum outrage from that by killing these, a lot of young people like this, innocent people, and you know what, and you got to admit, I mean, it's like, if you're at a concert and then you see a bunch of paragliders, you're thinking like, in this day and age, is this some part of a concert or something like that? You're not really in fear. It's the last thing on your mind that you're going to get a terrorist attack at a concert, through that kind of
from the sky.
Yeah, from that method. I mean, that was just unbelievable. But yeah, what Bob is saying here, well, Charlton, I guess it's this time. Okay, it's Charlton saying here, sorry, that this anti-Semitism, yeah, it's real. I mean, we live in an area where we have a pretty big Jewish population here in the DMV.
Yeah, Montgomery County, where you live, is the biggest Jewish population outside of New York City. It's like 125,000 Jews in Montgomery County. Yeah,
and so all this does, this divisiveness, is it will stoke more anti-Semitism with this. It's like, I really, it's a shame, because it won't be much longer here before we'll see more of the vandalism with the Nazi symbols going on to, being spray painted on synagogues and all these things. That will revive itself again, because there are a bunch of people who are going to be, brainwashed, by all this stuff they see in the media and all these other things they see through social media, thinking that Israel's in the wrong, and that there is the two-state solution is the answer, and that the people over there deserve their own homeland and all this stuff. But I don't know. I've always thought Israel's been pretty darn patient and pretty giving with everybody, and what do they get?
You had your own homeland, at Oslo, and probably pretty much any time since, right? They don't want, who's not for the two-state solution? Those guys, right? That's something the Jews want, the Americans want, the Western powers want. That's not what Palestinians want. They want the Jews gone. They're not going to recognize. The two-state solution requires that they recognize the Jewish state, and they're not going to do that. So, you're talking about, you're trying to visit a solution on them. They won't find any more satisfactory than they do what's going on today. So, you're not going to please them with that, right? You're not going to do it. And we're not going to stand by and let those people, get control of intercontinental ballistic missiles and that kind of thing, which they would get control of pretty quickly, thanks to Iran and other troublemakers.
Yeah, and I think you just made a really good point here, because it just, maybe I'm wrong, but it just seems to me, my perception of the way that the two-state solution, every time it's mentioned, it's like this panacea, right?
Yeah.
That this is the way to have peace in the Middle East. But it seems to be that this is the thing where people don't understand, is that the Palestinians, they won't, as you said, they don't want to recognize Israel. They want them out. They want them gone. But everybody's bought into this line that the two-state solution, is great and it's good for both sides. If Israel is for the two-state solution, they're willing to recognize and say, look, okay, we can live with this. We'll have an agreement for that. But you're not getting the other side to really agree to any of that, because what they want, they won't get. And yet Israel's always painted as the bad guy in this. It just drives me nuts.
That's right. That drives me nuts. Yeah, right. Okay, so right. And the other thing about that is, like, okay, the other one is that we're missing as a party is the opportunity is, these people are blatant racists, right? And yeah, there's a few people on the right that are saying similarly stupid things, but this is a leftist problem. This is their thing around their neck, and we should be talking about like why are you such a racist about this? Where does this come from? So because they hate people because of race, right? And that's why why a lot of this is going on, because they don't care. I mean, what is the first thing? What the first thing that Biden said to Israel after this happened? Don't retaliate. Like, excuse me, just let it go. No. I mean, why would that be the first reaction? Because his foreign policy shop is run by radical leftist racists, right? And that's why we are where we are today.
Yeah, and we can be honest and call these a lot of these liberals, these far lefties, racists. But no one in the media will ever accuse them of that. You can accuse conservatives, all day and all night, and they'll be labeled as that. But it's always as if it's verboten to say that a Democrat or a liberal or whatever can be a racist. But it's very clear, and
they started the Klan, right? Yeah. They opposed the civil rights legislation. They've done every racist thing they could possibly do. They've screamed, "We are the racists," and we're like, "Oh no, that's not it."
I think Rush used to say that a lot, didn't he? He would bring up a lot of those things, in terms of that, to remind people about that. And what Bob was saying here about just the squad. I think that wasn't there a report that maybe Dean Phillips or something like that. I mean, he's a Democrat, so funny. It's like maybe there's a possibility that that censure or something like that could happen to people like Tlaib or whatever when the House finally gets a speaker or whatever. I mean, I don't know if that could actually happen, but you do begin to wonder, it's like how much do we have to put up with elected officials like the squad going off and doing these things, and just makes you want to pull your hair out. And and there's no punishment for them. I mean, they keep mouthing off, and they just keep increasing the volume.
Yeah, and they can keep doing it, and their media protects them, and it's gross. It's terrible. It's a bad day for America. It's really exposing like the racism that we have not gotten rid of in this country.
Yeah. All right. So that actually, you mentioned the media. So that plays to this other thing I want to talk about, where I think we had discussed this whole Hamas, the whole bombing of, which was blamed on Israel striking a hospital in Gaza. And for which I think, Biden, the government had determined, no, it wasn't. I say Biden and even told Israel, it wasn't their side. And now the New York Times has admitted in a note that they may have relied a little bit too much on Hamas for the information.
Gaza Ministry of Health, which is the Hamas PR shop.
Yeah. So So this is what they said. I have to just read it because it's the Times's initial accounts attributed the claim of Israeli responsibility to Palestinian officials, and noted that the Israeli military said it was investigating the blast. However, the early versions of the coverage and prominence it received in the headline news alert and social media channels relied too heavily on claims by Hamas and did not make clear that those claims could not be immediately verified. The report left readers with an incorrect impression about what was known and how credible the account was. The thing, I love it, but
you got the wrong impression. We did not put out the wrong story.
Right.
you idiots who read our paper did not get the right story.
Yeah, you got the wrong impression from reading our story. It wasn't our fault that you got the wrong impression from reading our story, that we gave you the wrong information. And the thing is, like everything else, with the media, is that the correction comes, but the damage is initially done by that wave of how they reported it, because there are going to be people who will never see the correction, who won't listen to the correction, and all they have in their mind is that Israel struck the hospital. Right. But as we see now,
Tlaib keeps saying it. She's like, "Oh, that's nonsense. It was Israel." It's like, what? Come on, lady.
How much more evidence and reports do you need talking about? It was a rocket on the other side that that misfired, and it's like and this so many things just didn't add up in terms of how if Israel had actually done this, what would have actually happened in the end.
Yeah.
and all this. So yeah, but it's like, yeah, Hamas, they make a mistake there. And it's like, okay, well, we can blame Israel because the media will eat this up. And nobody will think twice about the fact that we're actually controlling the media. So, information flow is all one-sided. American media just, they lap that stuff up. It's a shameful performance on the part of the New York Times and other American media.
And not a lot of others too.
Oh yeah, they weren't the only one. I mean, it's a little bit too much. This 24/7 news cycle only makes this worse in a lot of cases.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can, I think CNN can use that excuse, MSDNC maybe, but New York Times, you're a newspaper, you do have time. Everybody recognizes that you're going to take time and get stuff right, and you didn't, right? You wanted your narrative, and you have people like Barry Weiss has his thing piece up now. Like, she left the New York Times over anti-Semitism. She's like, these guys hate me. I'm not working for them.
Yeah. So I mean, the Times is not necessarily involved as much in 24/7 coverage as the cable news networks, but everything has shifted that that venue, because printed newspapers, are not as important anymore, because it's old. By the time you get it, the news is old,
but
the website,
their place in the credibility hierarchy is higher,
right,
because they're more sober, they spend more time thinking about it, they do a little more work before they put it out to the audience.
Supposedly though. See, I think we're seeing that every year, every time they do those media surveys, that they just find that the credibility of the media continues to drop further and further and further
down below 10% now.
Because people are realizing that no, they're not big on fact checking and things like that. There's this massive chase for eyeballs and attention and things like this, and trying to get the story right doesn't seem to be part of their mantra anymore.
Right. It's ideological, and it's what they can keep out of the news, right? The censorship of it. And now you have these, one of the things that's starting to make big news on this is these news rating agencies, that these outfits that they say, this outlet is credible, this outlet is too biased, this outlet is fantastical, right? And there's these things. There's one called NewsGuard, and there's one called Ad Fontes. Are the two biggest ones, and they're starting to get a lot of negative attention, because they're basically enforcing leftist doctrine. I mean, if you look at the statistics of what they rate credible and what they rate uncredible, they're basically they love leftism and they hate conservatism, and that's reflected in their ratings. And they're all run by, the NewsGuard is run by Steve Brill, who worked for Hillary. The other one is run by a woman who's a, known Democrat donor, and the people who work for, hardcore radical leftists. And the findings that they have indicate that. But they're trying to make this like, we are arbiters of who is accurate and who is credible. And, go to their advertisers and say, hey, you don't want to be, give your name associated with these uncredible yahoos over here, so don't advertise with them. So it's a coordinated effort to try to silence conservative speech, and it's endorsed by the government. The government's buying it. They're spending money on it. Department of Homeland Security, Department of Education, state programs have it, right? It is a menace coming to society, and there are, like Elon Musk said the other day, that they should all be banished. So he is at least woken up to the problem.
Yeah, Elon is. I don't know. I mean, Elon's. He's in his own right. I mean, it's just.
He's a sharp guy. He marches to his own drummer, but he is a smart guy. He figured out to get into the businesses that are propped up by government subsidies, because government doesn't know what to pay for anything. So he's now, he's in rockets, solar, electric cars,
Yeah, I mean, and for Brill, I mean, hasn't Brill just done a lot of different things though? I mean, he's done the political stuff, but I mean, is he the same guy that is behind the security thing, the Clear? Is that the same guy?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think Steve. I think he tends to be more. I don't want to give him compliments, but maybe a little bit more of an entrepreneur who looks for where he can make some money, and he doesn't always succeed,
Right.
and everything like that, with some ideological
But I
tint.
mean, he's not declaring, this, he's not judging this fairly,
right.
right?
Yeah.
Whoever he is, right?
Yeah, and that's always the problem with these things is like you got to look behind the curtain a little bit and say who's really behind this.
And no one should be saying this is truth and this is not truth, right? No one's in position to do that.
Yeah, I mean I mean my feeling for just probably ever and ever, during the time when I was at AIM, I tell people like, look, I think that you need to read what we write, but you should also read what others write, and then judge for yourself.
Right.
We firmly believe our position is the correct position, is the truth, but go ahead and read the stuff from Fairness and Accuracy Reporting or others, and then judge it for yourself and see whether or not we aren't right. But I'm not going to say we are the 100. We were always 100% right, but we gave a viewpoint that probably was more right than others or something. It's one of those things. I mean, but there, AIM and Media Research Center and all these things, valuable resources as part of the way to kind of keep the media in check.
Yeah, huge at this point. Huge.
Yeah.
That's right.
So also, I just saw this morning too that Turkey's Erdogan called Hamas a liberation group. It's like, what the heck? I don't quite understand.
We put them in NATO and send them the F-35s yet. if we could still stop that, it might be a good time to do it. Right? I mean, they're not a liberation group. That's not what they're about. They're about terror. They want to wipe out Israel. That's not, and the term that they're using is decolonize, and that's, that applies to everybody. I mean, that's a poor against rich, color, various colors against white. So, watch out for that. That's coming at you.
I'm just thinking too. I mean, have you thought about this? Is there a prediction on your part in terms of how long this conflict will go on? I mean, I think we're at 19 or 20 days or whatever it is. I mean, it's it's still in its infancy, but how dug in, is Hamas to fighting back on this, that they're going to make this a protracted war. I don't want to say that we're going to go to the lengths of where we are with Ukraine and Russia, but this has the potential for going on for quite a while potentially. I mean, Hamas keeps getting its funding, as long as they've got the money coming from Iran and other sources. But it's just something that we can see going on for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, or
I don't think it will be that long. My sense of it is they don't really have a lot of weaponry. A lot of their infrastructure has already been destroyed, and a lot more is about to be destroyed. Their support in the community is starting to wane because they're getting a lot of people killed, right? And it's a fractious situation. I think we've moved like about half the active Navy fleet over there, right, into that zone, and their job is not to participate in the war. Their job is to make sure that no one else jumps in, right? Iran or anybody else gets frisky. We got the means to take you down right now. So there are people who say that like Iran's leadership could end up decapitated out of this, right? That it could be assassination attempts or whatever on them. I don't think that will come from us. I don't think our president thinks that way, but it could come from Israel, right? They could try to take out the leaders of Iran. But I think what we are doing is deterring others from joining on that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wonder in terms of Iran and how much how much they're willing to do, how much money they're willing to put into this whole thing.
Yeah.
To have things going here. You need to do a chat here. Hold on.
Okay.
Hold down the fort.
Okay. Oh, okay. I'm doing a chat here. The next thing I want to get to is, and I hope that this is what Don wants to talk to, is the speaker situation. I believe that today is finally the day on the speaker. There's supposed to be a vote here in about 15 minutes. And I think that vote will be successful in electing Mike Johnson speaker. Mike Johnson, this would obviously make me pretty happy. He not only from a Shreveport boy, but he's from our side of Shreveport. And, went to LSU and has been a really good congressman from the Louisiana 4th District. I guess he replaced John Fleming, who was a Republican from Minden area, West Webster Parish, who replaced Jim McCrary, who many of you Congress hounds may remember was chairman of House Ways and Means. So that's been a seat that's had some power with it over the years. Talking about Mike Johnson.
Yeah. So you're giving a little bit of a background of Mike.
Yeah. I was saying that he's a Shreveport guy. He's even from my side of Shreveport. He is Charlton's son, I think, worked for him for a little bit. So he's someone we know and we've been following. And I think he'd be a good pick. And I also think that he does have the votes. I think the stuff I saw last night, it looked like they've all just decided that this is a good candidate that they can all get behind. I have not heard anybody. There was, I guess, 44 votes for somebody else during the vote to make him the speaker designate. And now he's the speaker designate. It looks like they're all going to just say, yes, he's going to be the guy. I think the most important thing that happened is, and I'm glad this came out, and it infuriated Democrats, which, sort of was a co-benefit, you might say. But he has his press conference after, and the whole just looks like the whole Republican conference is standing behind him. And some woman comes up there and goes, "You are a top J6 election denier." And the whole caucus is like, "Yeah, shut up, boo." And, and I guess Virginia Top Fox just straight up told the lady to shut up, which is, a little bit. I think Trump has said the voting man, which is good. Trump Soleimani Tom Emmer yesterday, just one shot to the head. And because that would have been a disaster. Emmer would have been a disaster. That would have torn the caucus apart. So now, it looks like they're all behind him. And it looks like, I think that was a great thing because it showed that the Republicans are tired of that question. They're tired of, allowing people to bring up something that's immaterial and act like it's some big disqualifying deal that you thought Trump got ripped off in the election, because if you're following, and almost no one is following this because the media sure as heck ain't talking about it. But if you're following the John Eastman disbarment proceeding in California, right? So they say, well, you lied about such and such. Well, John Eastman's like, well, no, I didn't lie. I didn't lie about such and such a election fraud in such and such a state. Here's my evidence. And so, the right has finally got an opportunity to just roll out all this evidence that it has in this proceeding. And it's pretty darn compelling, right? He's talking about these pre-printed ballots, and in the course of this proceeding, the Postal Service admitted that you remember we heard about this mysterious, 18-wheeler that drove from New York to Pennsylvania full of pre-printed ballots that they just dumped into the system, right? Well, like, oh, you can't prove that. The USPS says, yes, you can prove that because we did prove that, and that's exactly what happened. So a lot of nonsense that went on in the 2020 election is coming to light in Eastman's disbarment proceeding, and there's nothing they can do about it because they keep accusing him of these things that, and his response is, "Why? Here's a ton of evidence to the contrary," right? So, there's a lot going on out there that actually changed the calculus on some of this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, Trump definitely has tried to weigh in on all of this stuff for the House, and it's. I mean, he endorsed Jordan, but that didn't work out. And then Trump obviously, he torpedoed Emmer. So that, I don't know. I think a lot of people are getting just kind of tired of this whole thing.
Right. I think that helps Johnson too. It's like anybody with misgivings about Johnson is like, okay, well, the option is, more chaos and finding another dude that we can get close to the line here and so forth. So I think that here in 10 minutes or so, they're going to make Johnson the speaker.
Yeah. So hopefully they get a speaker because I mean, wasn't there something else floating around that, should this fail, maybe a McCarthy Jordan type of situation would be another alternative.
Yeah. Yeah, seen something about that, but I mean, I don't think people want McCarthy all that. The reason to keep McCarthy near it all is that he is the better fundraiser of all these guys who are candidates. And it's, Johnson is certainly, the district he's from does not pump out a whole lot of money. I can tell you that from personal experience. But there is some money there, right? So they're going to have to deal with that capability, that money raising capability. So and improve it, enhance it, whatever. Maybe he will help. Once we get united behind something. I don't think Johnson is unacceptable to him. So I think we could end up with close to a unanimous vote today.
And he's not going to run afoul of Matt Gaetz trying to get him out of there if he doesn't like what he does.
Well, that's a good question because he will not have much of a honeymoon in this job because I guess the funding runs out. The temporary funding thing that we're operating under now runs out in November 11th or something.
Right, I think so.
Somewhere in there. So got to figure out which. So by then, are we going to do 12 appropriations bills in the House? I don't think so, right? So what will we do? So we don't want any more CRs. Do we say, okay, don't fund the government? I don't know. He has a tough choice on that. He also has, I don't think he is for any more Ukraine funding. Okay, so if the House produces a funding bill that has no money for Ukraine in it, what happens to that? Does that work? What does the Senate do? Do they, is there enough votes in the Senate to insist on this as a ride or die type of item? I don't know. I don't think so, but I don't know. So you could see, an abrupt end to Ukraine funding in the next few days, right? So then, do we have the votes for funding for Israel? And if so, for what in Israel? Are we buying armaments? Are we buying, are we paying to rebuild? The early Biden proposal, he wants to give a bunch of money to the terrorists, to Hamas, to Gaza, to the Gaza government, so to speak, which is controlled by Hamas, which is controlled by Iran, to fix everything the Israelis broke. So, he'll have some tough choices that come in right at him. And what do we do toward the end of the year? Do we try to get 12 appropriations bills through by the end of December, or do we come up with some kind of omnibus and something that's acceptable to our members? We've already made a deal that said, we'll only lower it 2% or whatever. So, I don't know. It won't be easy to be Mike Johnson in the next few weeks.
Yeah, like I've said many times before. I mean, this is a job you really probably most people don't want to wish for because it's a very tough job, and it takes very skilled people to make it through and survive in this job. And we'll see. I mean, we'll see if Johnson's up to it. I mean, as you said, with that short-term funding coming up, I think I guess it runs out probably midnight on the 10th or whatever that Saturday thing is that weekend. So he's got that, and then they've just got these other issues. Can you bring enough people together, even with that and anything else that comes up, to guide your caucus and Congress through all the things you've got to do? The Republicans they've got to, he's got to get off to hopefully a quick start, and get some victories behind him, and get the confidence of the conference and others behind him. And then I think he can have a good 2024 as he leads the Republicans into the election and hopefully, maintains their majority in 2024. But, the clock is ticking and it moves fast. It moves faster than you think sometimes.
That's right. Because you got to remember that, this year they can work all the way through Christmas, right? All the way through New Year's or whatever. But next year, an election year, so Congress generally wraps it up by the middle of October. And there's really not, they have a lame duck session at the end, but there's really not much that happens for the last 2 or 3 months of the year. I can remember when I was up there, you have to wear your suit if there's day of votes. There's no voting that day. You could dress more casual or whatever. And you were casual for all of the end of October, November, and December. You have a lame duck, come back right around Christmas. So I could see that happen. I could see that being where this ends.
All right, last quick topic, and then we'll wrap it up here. So there was a report that a whopping 3.6% of the American public has elected to take the new COVID shot. It's been 5 weeks, not exactly an overwhelming number. More people are obviously getting the flu shot. That's the thing that people tend to do anyway. It's been going on. That's been going on for decades, but it doesn't seem that this COVID shot has gotten much traction, and people are too worried about the whole thing.
Right. That's right. And I think that, we've realized you're almost certainly going to live through it. And the shot, what else is coming out now is a succession of studies showing the damage that has been caused by the vaccines, right? Pulmonary disease, heart disease, more liable to, more susceptible to recoding DNA. So you're not immune to things that you might have been immune to before. So yeah, they're just opening a bunch of new fronts on the problems that are caused by the vaccine. So I think there's some fear of the vaccine, of bad reactions and so forth, and also just a sense that this is over. We're not going to die from it, and it's no reason to be taking these chances.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed that in the pancreatic support group on Facebook too, that occasionally you get people who are questioning whether or not the vaccine had anything to do with it. Since you can't detect pancreatic cancer, I mean, that's probably more of a long shot, but this is the type of thing that does kind of get into people's minds. Is just that, people who were healthy before, all of a sudden come down with a disease that will maybe kill them, and then you wonder, how does that happen? Pancreatic cancer is much harder to actually try to, I think, draw a link to, but it probably can't be completely ignored either. In the sense that we just don't know enough about this, and plenty of people don't have the shot and they're fine. So
yeah, that's right.
Anyway, all right, wrap it up.
So I guess let's see what's on here. Virginia election is going to be close. I think it could well end up still with one house controlled by each party. These Trump people are pleading guilty in Georgia to, basically, jaywalking tickets rather than, being part of a RICO conspiracy, because it's just the cheapest way out of it at this point for them. So, I would not draw too much. And all this. So they're going to flip on Trump. What are they going? What is the flip? What will they say in the flip that hurts Trump's situation, right? Because to me, it's like either you can prove that Trump knew he lost and ordered all this done anyway, or you can't. And if you can't prove that, then the rest of the stuff falls apart, right? If he's legitimately a guy asking, saying, I was defrauded of my election, right? There's nothing illegal in that, right? Candidates do it all the time. The punishment for it is political, right? You can say, okay, we're not going to vote for you or any of your kind anymore because of that. But you get to say it's legal. It's free speech in America. You get to say that you think you got ripped off. Also, I feel the baseball, they're taking a lot of hits because they've ended up with Arizona and Texas in the World Series, two glamour teams. No Yankees, no Red Sox, no big Dodgers or Cubs or whatever. So, but I think this is very important, even if there's a little bit of a ratings slide this year because of it. For one thing, all big sports events are having ratings slides, right? Just people are not watching. People. For one thing, it's like everybody can watch their own team now. So national teams, it's if I'm watching every Pirates game all year, do I care about something that doesn't involve the Pirates? Maybe not, right? So, but the other thing is like, if you're a Pirates fan, then you have to look at these. The Rangers lost 100 games 2 years ago, right? The Diamondbacks, they haven't been 500 in 10 years until this year. And now they're in the World Series. That means your team can do it. The Royals, the Twins, the Tigers, the Indians, or Guardians, whatever they're called this week, they all have a chance. And, and the way they have a chance is because these two teams are in it. So there's a bright side to this, to the way that it ended up, even though, you know, they beat my Astros, dang it.
Yeah. All right. We're at the end. I'm going to wrap it up and just say thanks for joining us. And we'll see you again next week.